Yes, it's the playoffs. Yes, we don't have regular season football anymore. And yes, clearly we're bored. But we noticed something. In the aftermath of yesterday, we went from a almost tsunami of activity and conversation and frankly deals trying to be made in the chat to almost nothing. So those of us who care about this stuff decided let's get back together and start laying out some of the things that each team should be looking at for a buying and selling episode. Now, granted, this isn't going to be everything. We have 32 teams to get through, so we're going to maybe focus on one or two items for each team. But point is, we're trying to get the juices flowing here so we can get the activity going because we all know this is the time of year that everyone kind of slows down. Everyone focuses on other things. But one of the great things about this league is every part of the year is a time to be active. So we're trying to encourage that. Nonetheless, though, RJ, you excited to be back for 2 nights in a row?
Oh, definitely. I love looking at this stuff, and this beats looking at everybody's rosters, and sitting around doing it by myself.
Exactly. And this way, RJ and I will send out 16 offers tonight. And if nothing else, we'll at least try and create some activity, whether everyone else wants to or not. But nonetheless, we're going to start with the AFC here and then go back. But we're not going to start with the AFC North like we normally do um, because we're going to try and make sure we focus on a couple other areas first. So in a move that everyone will love, we're going to start with the Chiefs. Talking about Goose's team here. So, bringing up the roster is a classic Goose build. Um, there is one player, maybe two, who has an eight-figure salary. Um, Actually, three. Wow. This is definitely not a Goose build. Um, the point is, it is depth, very few studs, but a lot of good point scorers. And again, whoever has a good performance that week ends up being your point scorer. But he had three different starting quarterbacks this year. He has Damian Pierce, who was homegrown, but then also the added Brian Robinson, Ramondre, um, some depth at receiver, and then a very deep defense. Um, in terms of what Goose is going to do, he doesn't exactly need help from us on this. He's going to try and turn over some of these larger contracts because those are the non-core pieces of a Goose build. Normally, he likes to be able to buy the one or two contracts that he says these are my guys on a year-to-year basis, and then flip them if they're not necessarily going to be part of the core pieces. But the other aspect of this is selling high on some of these. So um, I think he got Brian Robinson for 2 seconds. Paid a very low price for Dawson Knox. Has him locked in at less than $2 million a year as the tight end linked to Josh Allen. A good collection of DNs. Again, not anyone who's a 200-point scorer, but you have a bunch of guys who on a week to week basis are going to score for you. And then, as mentioned, the same kind of depth at the linebacker position. So, um, if there's something I'm trying to move from this roster, I'm going to start with. I'm going to start with Dawson Knox. Um, Less than 2 million for the player, and I don't know if this is just me, but I feel like a lot of people walked out of the game between the Bengals and the Bills on Sunday and thought, is Diggs going to be back in Buffalo? And if Diggs isn't back in Buffalo, that means Gabe Davis is the number one, and Dawson Knox is in a second option um, number number two type role, even though he's not a number two receiver. So um, we'll see what ends up happening. People are probably overreacting to a loss here, but nonetheless, there is a possibility here. But anyway, RJ, what are you thinking?
I mean, I think that's a fantastic pick. So I'm also going to go with a similar approach. Like the more experienced owners, they don't necessarily need us to like point out the like nuanced players that need to be moved to like at the appropriate time or anything like that. So with these, I'll have a little bit more fun and pick out like players that I'm sure like Goose could capitalize and get some good value, but also the player, even if they quote unquote overpay, like the other owner would probably be thrilled to bring them on the team. And like I think that's basically what you did with Knox, which I agree with. I would say Russell Gage would be a fantastic one to sell and to purchase at this point. Um, like you can see the contract; it's fantastic. He didn't necessarily get the opportunities that we were hoping to see when he signed on there. Julio Jones kind of messed that up a tad bit, along with some injuries by him. But he did show flashes of being productive in Tampa Bay, and I think even with their question mark at quarterback, um, I think he's like a fantastic younger option to just watch, improve.
Right, and I think he's a very solid buy low, because everyone kind of saw the way he produced in Atlanta, the price he was at, and the fact he was going to be linked to Brady. And I know I, as well as others, thought he was absolutely worth the first.
Yep.
Well, he now just scored 110 points, and God knows what Brady's going to do. So, with that in mind, could you get him for a third? Again, that's a very large swing for a player of that caliber and a contract of that caliber. So, um, that being in mind, that's a lot of area of opportunity. So I love that pick.
Yep. I think it would probably I think the potential for like a late second is there. And I think that's like like a decent enough recoup in value to where Goose, like if Goose didn't believe in the player, like he'd be like, I'm okay with cutting bait at this price. But like I also there's probably a ton of believers in him that would be fine paying that.
Yep. All right, so let's move to the Chargers next. Chad's a new owner. Took this team owner from obviously a pretty experienced owner in Matt, but still definite opportunity to make it his own. Gino at $500,000 for 6 years, however long he is the quarterback in Seattle, that is an amazing contract. Having a starting quarterback at $500,000 is a huge advantage, even if he doesn't continue to perform at the top 10 level. Nick Chubb, 20 million. Unfortunately, that's where running backs are at this point. It's going to be difficult to do that. Cordell is going to fall off, but Chubb will be his guy. A good depth collection of receiver between Ayuk, Sutton, Agnew, and others. Mark Andrews is still a stud, even if he's worth 20 million in this case. And then the defense, primarily around linebackers, comes together well, but the D end isn't quite there. So, um, the question I would have with this roster, and it's the question probably across the dynasty community right now, is what do you do with the San Francisco quarterback situation? So Trey Lance obviously has the pedigree, and anyone who has a set of eyes because of his mobility and strong arm sees from a prospect perspective, and I want to be clear about this, from a prospect perspective, he's a better match and a better option than Brock Purdy. That said, Brock Purdy, from an execution and an accuracy perspective, has been beating the crap out of everybody. So there's definitely a window here to potentially either go get Brock Purdy at a discount, and from what I've been told, that window is probably closed, or there may be an opportunity to get Trey Lance at a better price. So at the same time, I wonder if it's a good time to be, cashing out of your Trey Lance shares. If you could get a mid first for Trey, is that worth it to not get yourself in a situation where the 49ers kind of just wash their hands and say, all right, he's got to win the job from Brock. We're going to have them compete with each other. And until then, he's going to sit on the bench, at which point his value will just drop from this mid-first or early first perspective to probably a second or third at best. So I think there's an opportunity, and I'm not sure whether it's on the buy side or sell side of Trey, but I feel like there's enough of an arbitrage that he makes the sense to focus on here.
Man, that's really interesting. I do agree with that. That made me think. I was looking more along the lines on moving a receiver. I don't know if it's an ascending talent like a Brandon Ayuk to cash out like at the highest possible value and start to rebuild your wide receiver core from there, because it's already really good with the depth pieces. All you have to do is go out and buy another stud.
Yep.
Or something small like moving a Brandon Powell while he still has value, which I don't know if that really nets you much of a actual value.
That's true. And there's also the opportunity to kind of sell along the edges. Like Jalen Ramsey, less than $3 million for a consistently solid 200-point scoring corner. Now, plenty of opportunities to get good scoring corners for cheaper, but sometimes it's worth it to spend a couple million just to know you have the consistency at the position. But I'd say those are the areas that I would focus on. There, again, Chubb, he's got Geno on the trade block. We'll see what he ends up getting for those guys. But I think, between Geno and Trey, those are the areas I'd start with to try and put together some of these trades.
Is there potential that this team just pushes into a full rebuild?
I mean, maybe. And that's the question, is he potentially has two very good starting quarterbacks. Can he flip one of those for another position of need, or does he keep both? Or what does he do from a sort of positioning perspective? And speaking of positioning, the next team is very much in that same kind of boat. The Raiders has already turned over their quarterback this year, which I love because, I love activity. But that said, they have a lot of stuff on this team that they lost down the stretch because those pieces got injured. So it's a question of, do you stick with those, or do you start to think about pieces who may not necessarily be as injury prone? So, for example, you want to get Lamar Jackson from Jeremy for Aaron Rodgers. So Jeremy's a big Packers fan. Makes sense. The piece I'll start with here, because I think it is going to be sort of the keystone to what direction he goes, is Jonathan Taylor. So he and I made a big deal last year for Jonathan Taylor. It cost him CeeDee Lamb and Darius Leonard, amongst other pieces. But the point is, he made a major deal for that last year. Now it's a question of Taylor is coming off of an injury year, not quite a productive year. What does Raiders do with him, and what does he potentially sell him for? That said, Taylor is now another year closer to contract renegotiation time. So what could he potentially get for him? So he's already put it out there that he's trying to get multiple pieces for him. I'm interested to see what those pieces look like, because I could see a world, and I haven't done the research on this yet, but I think it's there, to say, give me an Aaron Jones, a DeAndre Hopkins, and another solid starter on defense, and I'll give you Jonathan Taylor. Those are players that most dynasty owners aren't going to look at as a, running back 1, wide receiver 1, and DE 1 potentially, but still produce those kind of values. and you're getting the right now valuation of that player, rather than, okay, I got to wait till week 6 until Taylor goes completely nuts and gets me what I can potentially get for him in the dynasty trade market. So I think we'd start with Taylor. The other option being, um, we'll just stick with Taylor. I think there's some potential bargain options, or good shopping on this team, but we got to see how he values those players.
The other one that I would say is in a similar sense to Taylor is Josh Sweat.
Oh God, how did I forget Josh
He
Sweat?
he exploded this year. If there's gonna be a year to like cash out on him and profit, it's this year. His contract's fantastic. That's been in place for years now. Now it's just about like getting more than what you paid for him.
I mean, that's the thing. God, that's embarrassing because our two favorite players for him are the two players that traded him, Jonathan Taylor and Josh Sweat. So, um, you know, he's got a good eye for targeting around the league. It might be time to brush that skill set off and continue to build out the back end of his team, um, while he has some of these valuable pieces to do it. The question will be, again, with Chargers in a challenging position, Goose being Goose, and then um, the Broncos. I mean, obviously need another year or two. What directions do you go here?
Right.
But that can be a future person problem. As for Broncos, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because Bill's obviously quite active. Um, I think the piece that I would start with on Bill's team that maybe he's not thinking about is um, is Jamar Chase. So I get it. From a dynasty perspective, he is one of the top guys. The question is, what is Jamar Chase ever going to do to increase his value? So there is a perspective of this thinking, if he's never going to increase his perceived value from where it is, I'm at the pinnacle, I'm at the top of his valuation. So it makes sense to sell him and book those profits before they go potentially down. Now, that said, he has quite a few many years, especially with Joe Burrow, before that time really happens. So the question is, does it make sense to get ahead of yourself here? But is there a lateral move similar to what he did to get the Chase in the first place to go get another wide receiver one and additional compensation that lets him build out some of the additional areas of the team here? So I think that's where I'd be looking is, I mean, especially after what should have been a 2 touchdown performance against the Bills, can he go find someone who's going to give him a nice little treasure chest for Jamar Chase? And part of that treasure chest being a wide receiver 1/2, kind of on the scale of a Marquise Brown, to give him what he needs to compete.
Yep. I agree. Jamar Chase or Hollywood. I feel you kind of do that with both of them. Hollywood's a great one because the perception is he could be the wide receiver one in Arizona this year. Um, so why not why not trade him while his value is relatively high? Same with Chase and cash out for something younger. Like that's the main goal in it. Like sure, Chase is probably what second number 2 dynasty wide receiver right now. Is he gonna get to number 1? I don't know. And like by the time age starts to play into it, like a few years down the line, they like him, Justin Jefferson, CD Lamb, like they all will not be the number 1 or number 2 just by way of there being younger players in the league. They're going to be a year younger, but also there's going to be another crop of younger players that will just by way of being younger surpass them in value.
No, that's fair. Um, all right, let's move over to the AFC East. Um, League runner-up Dolphins. Um, Again, I think this was a surprise to find him where we found him. Not saying he didn't believe to deserve to be there, but it was definitely a surprise to have him there. Um, the player I'm most interested to see what he does with, and it's probably going to be a conversation of patience and execution, is Saquon Barkley. Um, he was by far and away for the Minnesota game everything that team hoped he could be. He plugged into that game and he was ready to just run people over, move around people, get the spin moves going. He had everything at his disposal. And for the portions I saw of the Giants and Eagles game, I didn't feel the same way. Like he didn't seem like the same player. So I don't know if it's a let's go store him on, our sword section and see what happens with everything else, thinking he can pick it right up where he left off. But that also being said, there's an advantage that comes with this that'd be foolish to let go. So I think it's Saquon is where I'm focusing with this player with the Dolphins, and I want to see what he does with Saquon before he goes too much further down the line.
If he can get a really good value for Saquon, I think that's a great idea. My only question is, how back to a how close to a normal value is Saquon? Just because, like, we're 5 years out of his rookie year at this point. Um, the one that I would like to see him sell, and I think people would still be willing to pay the price, is Jalen Hurts. Um, I think there is not gonna be a time where he's more valuable than right now. Uh, Cash out on him now while you can get a starting quarterback or enough to go buy another starting quarterback, plus enough to give yourself multiple upgrades on offense or defense or both if you choose. Whether that's like get a haul of picks, basically get an upgrade at like every position and a downgrade at quarterback, or just move Jalen Hurts while he's worth an insane amount, but also like an amount that's still reasonable enough to where somebody can like purchase him. Because like next season, if he just balls out again, I don't know if he becomes like movable at that point. He might just be way too valuable. Did we lose Mike?
I just realized I said all of that on mute. That's embarrassing.
That's all right.
All right, let's try this again. And again, I apologize for the oversight to everybody. If I'm the Jets, the big thing I'm looking at is my plethora of wide receivers. Um, Having the need to start two and the ability to start five, I think that's a great area for him to load up on capable production. That said, he definitely took some risk at the running back and the wide and the quarterback perspective. That it makes sense for him to try and hedge if he can. So, I think that's how we would approach the situation. But point is, um, I'm sure he's tried to get something for Odell, or else he wouldn't continue to be doing it. But what comes back for him, and then looking at say like a Leonard Fournette, is he a true hold until you see where he lands, and then it's a pure flip situation?
Yeah. I question what Fournette's gonna like, what his value would be trying to trade him. But I would understand breaking down one of the younger wide receivers into a lesser wide receiver and like a lesser young wide receiver plus.
Very true.
Because I can
Let's
I
keep this part short. Sorry, go ahead.
I could just see somebody like taking somebody that was a rookie this year, a lesser rookie, and a first round pick, and trading for Garrett Wilson or something of that nature.
It's a fair point. I mean, I feel like when you get into the three-piece portion of the conversation, the entire sort of premise changes as to what it will take to get a deal done.
Right.
That said, as for Pats, I'll keep this simple. Anything that's worth value, he bought. Anything that is kind of throwaway, he needs the flexibility to throw away. So let the player add the pieces he wants to add as part of his core conversation, but then let everything else kind of float to next season.
Yep. Keep doing what you're doing.
I mean, it's bad luck with the whole Amenahu situation with him getting arrested this week, but I would say taking a look at either Dylan, or I really like the idea that he has of splitting apart Justin Herbert. Like, that's the thing you need to be doing, because that's going to give you what you need to continue to build the team. So I like that approach, and we'll see how it continues to go.
Yeah. I think that's the like for me that's the only piece that I can point at and like break down Herbert. But if he wants to keep him, keep him. Like it's a good place to park money and contract years.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. All right. Talk about the Titans. Tom Brady, his contract expiring. No real running back. No real receiver, but potential depth. No tight end. You gotta give him credit. As soon as Luigi realized he didn't think he was getting past the first round, the tank came out a rolling, and that's exactly what we're seeing here.
Yeah, for sure.
Now that said, trying to find a player it makes sense to do something with.
I'd say get rid of Kenneth Murray while you can,
Right.
while he's still some type of value.
Yep. My whole question would be Sky Moore and Isaiah McKenzie. Both have shown capability at kind of that wide receiver 3 or 4 perspective. Will perform higher than it, but I think McKenzie saw enough action in yesterday's game that he would be in the conversation. But also, um, Sky, of course, being a rookie and a well-regarded rookie, what does he look like next year, and how does the team continue to build him out and continue to use him? So, not sure what the answer is there, but definitely something that we're all going to see a little bit more content on before a decision gets made.
Yep.
All right, we'll go into the Jags.
This is an interesting one.
So, I'm going to challenge both of us here. I think we can do 2 on this roster, but we're only allowed to do one obvious one. So we have to do an obvious one and a less obvious one. Is that something you're up for?
Yeah, that's fine.
So the most obvious one I'm going to leave for you. The less obvious of the obvious is Joey Bosa. So $8 million after the extension, renegotiation, la-di-da-di, everybody. He's now on a reasonable contract despite the fact that he's a linebacker. That said, he is one of the more dominant pass rushing specialists in the league. For $8 million, that could very well be a very productive contract. Now, that said, a lot of folks in the league won't spend a first rounder on linebackers because of performance and getting the performance for cheaper. That's not going to work for Joey Bosa. People are going to remember him as a D end and therefore ask for a mid or higher first for him. Point is, I think he's a good player to put out there because it looks like there's some movement of the guard in terms of support of where the assistants are lining up, but nothing really on the main coaching perspective. So it should be a similar system as the last year, but there's a lot of opportunity to switch this thing up, and it needs to be switched up, and everyone's really supportive of that. So if you have the opportunity to kind of rebuild the way your team's coming together, and you can do it with a positive vibe behind it, I think that's always what you're looking for when you're trying to build in the offseason. So give me Joey Bosa. You got to ask for the first. I don't know if you're going to get a high first for him based off the contract and everything of that standpoint, but go shop him and see where he is on everyone's radar. I think there's some that have him in the mid to high first, some that have him in the mid to late first. But price him at that. You've got a large population. Let's see what we can do here.
Yeah, I completely agree with that one. I'm kind of more in the boat with you. I think if you shop him around properly, you will be surprised at the amount of people that actually do believe in him and that probably would pay a good amount for him. The other obvious one, Mahomes. Like, I think it's pretty common sense. Like, this team has definitely improved from last year, but that much value, that much contract into one player, and while still in the hopes of rebuilding, it just break him down into multiple assets and go shopping. Like either go shopping for players or go get a bunch of picks and then turn around and go shopping. I don't think that's where you like as a rebuilding team. I don't think you want all your value in a quarterback.
Right. And you almost wonder if he was able to get Mahomes into three productive pieces. Not saying this would happen, but say he goes to not Bengals, goes to Colts and says, "Give me Goff, give me a running back, give me Amari Cooper, and I'll give you Patrick Mahomes." Like he could do that in a form that answers three starting positions and potentially three number one starting positions, and do that for the cost of Patrick Mahomes. I think one of the things that people struggle with in this league is conflating um, quality starter in our system and quality starter in the NFL. And that's something that everyone's going to challenge with and continue to adjust with, but it's not something that is as straightforward as I think people have it out there to be.
Yeah.
Um, you left me the other obvious one.
Hmm.
So, but I'm not going to take it. I'm going to go a different direction. If I'm making a move right now, I might also see what I can do with Calvin Ridley. So, you bought him as a project and an upside play as to we'll see what happens in the upcoming season. The Jags might be the most optimistic team from the playoffs right now. So you take a look at how everyone finished. You know, the Cowboys feel like letdowns. The Chargers are complete disappointments in terms of how they performed. You look at anyone who's been knocked out of the playoffs, and it's a very negative conversation about where that team is. Now, let's turn around and talk about the Jaguars. You got Christian Kirk, who has performed like he's worth the money. You've got Marvin Jones, your crafty veteran. You've got Zay Jones, who has just been, taking full advantage of a large target volume. Evan Ingram's on a career rebound. Like, the question becomes, okay, if I plug Calvin Ridley and everything he can do into the role that Marvin Jones had this year, like he had, I believe, 100 targets. So you give Calvin Ridley 100 targets in that system with everything spread out as it is, like that's a 1,000-yard receiver. That's 8 touchdowns. Like you have a story you can tell of overlaying Ridley on what Marvin Jones did to potentially start getting some of the value back for him you might not have been able to before. And that's going to be the tricky thing about this offseason is whether you ever get to a point where he gets the full value back or it's a matter of this is the most I'm going to get, call it what it is, and let's move to the next thing.
He's one. I don't even think it would be shocking. Like I think you can still get the value back. Like I think there's a good portion of people that still believe he will be productive when he does come back to the NFL.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about the other one. Let's move on to another team.
Is the obvious one Matt Judon?
Yep.
Yep. Just I would actually argue to say I think the time may have passed where you could really make great value on him. Now he's just a 30-year-old underpriced linebacker. Still a stud, but I don't, 2 years ago he was an insane value. A year ago he was an insane value. Now he's just kind of, yeah, if you can get an early second, I guess. But I don't see anybody paying up a first for him anymore.
Yeah, I think he definitely missed his window, but that said, I think there's still something for him there. and the contract in and of itself. Like the production is probably right at that early second perspective. The long term vision is not going to do him any favors, but um, the contract value is probably, I would say, still worth a first.
Yeah. I would be interested if a team like yours with a late first this year, like I wonder if he goes to you and he asks for 132. Like, I wonder if that gets it done because like I can see something like that happening.
The problem there becomes my team versus a team like my team. Like if you look at my team, I already have like the Khalil Macks, the Bud Dupree's, the players who kind of fit that profile.
Right.
So he's got to find the team like my team, not my team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess that gives some insight to those other teams with a late first this year. Go try to buy Matt Judon.
Well, I mean, that being said, we'll see what happens if those players remain on my team. Anyways, talking about the Colts, we'll keep this pretty simple. DeForest Buckner at $11 million with the potential sunset of the career of Aaron Donald could be a very nice value and could be the thing that sets the contract valuation of D tackles going forward. Now, that said, whether he's that guy or not, I think there's a lot of pieces on offense that make a lot of sense for Roderick to go check the market on, many of which I traded to him, but take the sort of collective price of them, break them into smaller pieces, and see what they can get you. Because I think that's a great opportunity for this team to build itself up and provide something to build on for next year.
Yeah. Man, that's about it for like the aging players that you can really break down on that team. He's done a really good job of turning it over to younger guys. The only other one I would suggest is Amari Cooper, and like he still might have gas left in the tank. But every like all the other assets that he has, I would probably hold on to. I mean, yeah, maybe you can sell the quality season on Freiermuth, but I don't think there's really a need to do that. He's gonna keep improving. So yeah,
That's true.
maybe flip Trayvon Walker, which I know he's trying to do right now, but I don't know if anybody's really paying a high price for him.
It's a tough thing to do, but the challenge here is quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Brock Purdy, as a 49ers fan, is a surprise and a gift versus what we were expecting this year. So what does that mean to Trey Lance? What does that mean to the 49ers team going forward? Nobody quite knows. That said, between Brock, Deshaun, and Mike White, there's a lot of starts there and a lot of optionality there. Granted, Brock unfortunately will serve out his 2 years at $450 and need to be paid a whole lot more to be extended. But if you have the person who's giving the ball to Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Elijah Mitchell, among others, like that's the kind of player you want racking up yards and other stuff for you. So I'm all for sort of the positioning of it, even though it wasn't planned.
Okay.
But I would say, as for a player beyond just the quarterback position, that's the challenge here. is a lot of these players were kind of systemic buys, not necessarily a good value buy. Um, I want to go see. I want to see a Brock Purdy trade right now. I want to see what Brock Purdy is calling for in the market as we go here because I think it's much higher than I would be willing to pay. But frankly, I want to see what that looks like.
I agree with that. I would be interested just for the sake of seeing what the price is. The only other thing that I could rationalize on this team is the Arizona linebacker, my Sanders,
Hmm.
and that's just a matter of like he was an early pick. So like, is there a way that you can just get a re-roll on your draft pick, get the same capital back out of him, and try to get somebody better?
I mean, potentially, but there's a lot of optionality in that conversation.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move up to the AFC North. And then, based off the fact that we are 46 minutes into this, we'll probably call it at the North, but we'll continue on with the NFC next week. So we'll start with the Browns winning the division. Um, I'm just going to overly simplify this, whether it's right, wrong, or otherwise. This team has a lot of work to do. None of it is structural. Like the team is there, the talent is there, but somebody needs to do the work to make sure everyone understands what are the pieces behind him and does that make sense. So I think there's some pieces there that we need to work through, but we're not going to have an exact situation or impact until we get a little bit into it.
Yeah. Um, I mean, like as far as a player that I would suggest moving on from, or at least trying to like get peak value, would probably be CD. Like it's another one of those like just get as much as you can while you can type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like the it at no point is he going to be worth more. So just see if somebody's willing to pay that. Now, you know, some people may view that price as too much. But if somebody's willing to pay the price, I think you cash out on him.
And sometimes that's what it takes.
Yep.
All right. All right. So as for a piece or a trade that I think makes sense, um, he's continued to build depth at the linebacker position, which is hilarious to me because he wants to get out of that and trade faster than anybody. But nonetheless, we'll get in the process, we'll get things going, and then we'll let the team build from there. All right, moving on. Let's start at the bottom. Let's go to the Steelers.
Okay.
So I would say, and this is going to hurt some feelings, that this team is one of my bigger offensive teams of the offseason. Like, I want to see what they do. I want to see when they go out to hunt in the water. I want to see how this all comes together. And it hasn't been happening. So we need to figure out what that is, but also what we do with it. So um, I'm interested to see what happens there. As for the players, I mean, no TJ Watt, but the big piece is, God, what do you do with that? I mean, it's just tough. Like, you can't really sit here and expect crazy things to happen, but at the same time, you don't know how to deal with some of this craziness. So there's some lessons to be learned from both.
Yep. So who would you get rid of?
I would say the player I'm moving is Fred Warner.
Okay.
He is showing out to a point where if I'm trying to move a player, I want him overly indulging and supporting the conversation while others are still kind of going through the process. But I think that makes a lot of sense for him. So that would be my plan in terms of how to deal with him into the new year.
Okay. I think the player that Pittsburgh needs to move on from is Mac Jones.
That's interesting. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about that.
So, what's Pittsburgh's pick this year?
Which I don't know.
I'm checking right now. I just got to pull up their draft order. He has the 11th pick in the draft this year. Turn Mac into a mid-first, maybe a little bit more than a mid-first. Maybe take that mid-first and 10, get into the early part of this draft, or something of that nature. But I think you don't ride the Mac Jones roller coaster anymore. If you're a team in this situation, you want to improve, and you have 3 really good teams ahead of you, you want a really good quarterback, not like middle of the road, unsure of what his job's going to be on an annual basis. So get rid of him while he's still a decent contract, while there's still a whole bunch of extra little things that make him more valuable than just the player that he is.
Which makes a lot of sense. So at some point, it's kind of should or get off the pot with him.
All right.
All right. 3 more. Bengals, Ravens, and we already did Steelers. So we'll talk about Bengals. I mean, let's be honest with Chris. He wants a quarterback. He's trying to do it on the cheap, and part of the dance with everything else is what he does. I got Bill coming in as well. So 1 second.
Okay. Well,
sorry. So go ahead, RJ. Maybe you lead off this one while Bill gets up to speed on where we are. Welcome, Bill. We're talking about the Bengals in terms of the one player or the one trade he needs to make.
I want to see Chris go buy a quarterback with the 101, like an established quarterback already.
I agree.
Like, can he add something to the 101 to go get Jalen Hurts?
100%. 100%.
I mean, it's like I don't think the 101 gets you Jalen Hurts, so it's like a matter of what else on top of that, or like, does he go get? I don't know what other quarterback is worth. Can he make the cap work, and does he give up 101 to the Jags for Pat Mahomes?
That's a great question.
I don't think Jags is moving Mahomes. Jags doesn't move anybody.
I suggested that he does, or else he's going to be stuck in the middle the whole time.
Oh, okay. So I would say that. Does Chris have any picks?
Like, he's losing the day. He does have the 101.
He has a 4th and a 3rd next year.
And he still has the 101.
Yeah, and the 101. So I would offer the 101. I would offer probably Keenan Allen and maybe like an extra topper, like just something random, whatever you feel like Dolphins might need. Like whatever you think you could throw on and be comfortable with and offer it for Hurts. Dolphins has turned down, or has not has turned down. He has been slow to act on two insanely good offers for Hurts, and he's regretting it. So he's going to need more than 1-on-1, but yeah, he's open to it. He just needs paid well.
All right, well, we'll see what that ends up kind of falling out as. Yeah, I mean, he's already made. There's some of these teams like Bengals where I feel like he's already made enough offers and enough deals that he doesn't need me laying this out for him. But there's a lot of stuff that makes sense for him to just kind of say, "Hey, this is my team," and kind of just fold.
Yeah, he needs to figure out running back as well, but quarterback's way more important right now.
Yep.
I mean, what if he goes to somebody like Vikings and I don't know, Mike? What do you get? He gives up Najee Harris and Zach Wilson for the 101. No, I don't know if that's enough.
I mean,
So I had offered in the previous owner something around Najee for the 101. It was not enough, and I understand, but point is, it's a question of what's that delineation between current players and future players that makes it worth it. So I think every owner has their balance, but I have not quite struck that yet. At this, we've got where a Giants is coming in.
cool.
Hide your kids, hide your wives.
As we do the last team of the evening, and then talk about the two trades that happened.
Yeah, basically. All right, why don't you take point on the last team of the evening here, RJ, while I catch myself up as I'm doing some of the podcast management here.
Yeah, no problem. So Ravens is the last one that we're talking about. Really good team. A disappointing run in the playoffs, but I don't think this team is necessarily bad. I do think some things are going to need to be changed. The one thing that I'd be interested in seeing him move would probably be, oh man, I'd like to see him move James Conner, but I'd be hesitant at like what you'd get value wise. But I would probably be if I'm him, I'm looking to move DJ Moore and see if I can get another starting wide receiver in the league and some other value to do other things with. You need to improve not necessarily improve, but you want to upgrade like other positions. Maybe add another linebacker, add another safe defensive end. And you're going to need the picks to do that. And if I'm not mistaken, he doesn't have a large amount of picks. He has a first and a second this year.
Yeah,
Yep.
He has Washington's first and Jets second.
Okay. So like, yeah, in theory, you can go out and buy yourself like some assets, but like, is that too? A first and a second's going to get you or draft you two really good assets. Like
Right.
I think you need a little bit more. Like, I think you need more to work with as far as like trades. So just break down the big wide receiver. Obviously make sure you get a some type of wide receiver that gets a decent floor. And then, can you get a second? Can you get 2/3? Can you get a first even? It's just a matter of like, what can you get on top of that, and then go out and buy other things. Go out and buy your other pass catching running back to replace James Conner's production, because you're under the assumption Pacheco is gonna get more of the work next year.
Well, I think he's got the right balance in terms of running back versus broader perspective, but we'll see how it translates.
Yeah, I just think his is more about insulating with like what the worst case scenarios are. So like if nobody's gonna buy James Conner because we all assume he's gonna be replaced by like some rookie or he's gonna be the backup to a rookie, like go out and insulate yourself early. Do that by means of what can you get for other assets.
This could be a great team to focus their attention on Falcons and Josh Jacobs or David Montgomery.
He's got no cap.
Well, I mean, they're talking about right now. Like, he could always do it post rollover. You don't have to take on a 5th-year option. Right now you can do that and then trade extend, or just not extend at all.
Sure.
But
Or he takes DJ Moore and a first and James Conner and tries to go get Saquon Barkley from the Dolphins.
yeah, you could do that. I mean, it could also be a situation. It can't
Just
take
saying.
something crazy like that, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good starter of the conversation, and if nothing else, I don't think it's enough. Others might think it's a huge and massive overpay.
Mhm.
So it could be right there.
Yeah, I've tried to offer him Clyde in a bunch of various deals because he wouldn't sell me Pacheco, so I was like, all right, well, do you want the second half of the committee?
What does he want the 3rd-string running back in Kansas City for?
Well, he's not the 3rd string.
He is.
Jerick McKinnon was the number 1 scoring running back over the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, it's Pacheco and McKinnon. It's
Clyde's hurt. He hasn't played in like 3
always
months.
hurt.
McKinnon's he was on a 1-year deal. I doubt he's gonna be back.
And then what happens when Rojo comes back? No, I'm joking.
We're just going elsewhere.
No, it's interesting. Like, he has a lot of options. Like, this could be an interesting, interdivision deal where he could give more to the Bengals for a tight end, like Njoku and one of the linebackers or something like that, and then Bengals could turn around and use more to go get Hurts. Not necessarily going to happen that way, obviously, but just long term.
I don't think Hurts is moving.
Yeah.
After the conversations that I've heard or had with Dolphins, I don't think he's necessarily going anywhere either, unless he gets Pro Bowled and then gets like $50 million.
But he's on a pretty long-term deal now, anyways.
Yeah.
So it won't happen. So Chris yelled at me about this in the main chat. Hurts has until he actually is listed at 2 years before he can be Pro Bowl like risked.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got 2 seasons left, which is fine. That's going to be totally fine. But what happens within 2 years? Who knows? It's going to be a fun ride for Dolphins or whoever pays a shitload of money or capital to get Hurts.
Yeah. I agree.
Yep.
So we want to talk about the 2 trades that happened, the league altering trades.
League altering, I think, is a bit of an over exaggeration, but we'll go ahead and talk about them nonetheless.
All right.
Post-flood deal.
Oh, I was talking about the 2/3 and Ty Montgomery and Shelby Harris.
Well, yeah, but that's that one. But the 2 we got. This is what people are missing when they don't come on and do the post pod.
Yep,
they're missing the opportunity to get Gabe Davis
or Chris Olave.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a kind of walk backwards in the process. So, yeah, I think it is something that we're definitely missing by not having people on.
So, how's everybody else feel about that Vikings Bengals trade?
Can we go over the explosive trade again?
Yep. Let me pull that up.
It was Ryan Tannehill and Chris Olave for Gabe Davis. The
Dolphins 2 this year and Bengals 2 next year.
Yeah, what is the Dolphins 2 this year?
231.
120 something. Okay.
231.
231, and Bengals was what, like 222 or something like that?
Probably in the mid 20s.
Yeah.
Well, that's a 24 pick, so we don't know
Yeah.
what it's going to be yet.
That'll be
Mike,
another
I'm curious.
231.
I'm curious why you were interested in this trade.
So the big challenge for me has been breaking down players that are on my IR or on my taxi squad to make sure I have space to bring them back on. So the question was what to do with Ryan Tannehill. I've offered him around the league a few times and couldn't quite get a bite, but this allowed me to get a bite. So it's a combination of that with if you take a player like Chris Olave and say, all right, you're about to enter your second year as a 23-year-old. You got 2 more years, and then you're going to be worth a shitload of money, and it's going to be really challenging. But I also have no idea who your quarterback's going to be. And from a comparison standpoint, you have what Buffalo has right now, especially with a potential future where Diggs gets traded, and having Gabe Davis at $2 million a year just makes way too much sense to reconsider.
Yeah, okay. I didn't like the trade at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think like the downgrade from Olave to Gabe Davis is gigantic considering the contracts, but I really like Olave. I would have had a really hard time pulling that trigger.
I like Olave too, but if you take it a point per game perspective, I think Davis is on par, if not better, than Olave. You take who's the quarterback that is going to be feeding him the ball.
No.
Davis has that in spades, and then last but not least, you have Davis on a second contract, and Olave is not there yet. So at some point, someone's going to have a $16 million Olave, and as long as I or a potential future owner of Gabe Davis doesn't fall asleep at the wheel, that's not going to happen with Davis.
See, the only thing that I find value in is the long-term contracts for Davis comparatively. Like the fact that you don't have to worry about him ever, like really ever, going above $5 million is worth the deal. I don't like by comparison, I don't like the talent of Davis versus Olave. I think Olave is far and away beyond him. But your point about quarterback is relevant, and I get it.
Yeah.
This is a competitor move. This is not something that a rebuild team would do. This is a competitor. Like, I'm going to take the better situation right now for instead of the unknown situation.
Yeah.
I get that. How old is Gabe Davis?
23.
No, 23, 24. Yeah, he's young.
I have a 23-year-old on a second contract that's going to stay under $25 million, who is linked to Josh Allen, and who performed on the same level of performance as Chris Olave. Like, that's the conversation as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's fair. It's definitely fair. Yeah, I was just curious what your thought process was, but I do think in the abstract we get too afraid of like 5th-year option or like inflation of those contracts a couple years down the line. Because like if you were to compare their 2 contracts, so basically Olave will have 2 years of way more expensive than Gabe Davis at the end of both of their contracts. But like for the next 3 years, they're still relatively the same price, or at least, I don't know. I think sometimes we like over analyze or over like try and future proof our rosters, because it's still super cheap Olave for the next 3 years, who I think was one of the best rookies coming out of the class and like really impressed me all year with shit quarterback play. And he was like their only offensive weapon outside of the run game.
No, and that's fair. But let's talk about where we are right now. Like you said, Gabe Davis missed 1, 2, 3 games and was 170 points and $1 million less than Chris Olave, who missed 1, 2 games and was 20 points more.
Yeah.
So, any a 1 year difference. So, again, that's my approach towards it. That's why I did what I did. But I think there's plenty of good reasons on either side, because you could also point around and say, hey, look, 20 points better, and Andy Dalton was throwing the ball. Imagine if the Saints get a competent quarterback throwing the ball around instead of
Like, what if they get Aaron Rodgers or whoever?
Yeah.
Yeah.
right.
No, I mean, I understand both sides of it. It's just it's value right now. Like the look of it is Olave could have been had for way more. Like you could have gotten way more out of it. Gabe Davis couldn't have touched where Olave could have gotten it, in my opinion. Just opinion. Like think about who had Olave first, Colts, right? I don't see Colts giving 108 or whatever for Davis, but he would absolutely do it for Olave. And a lot of people in the league would, I think. So that's all I'm looking at it as. It's just like valuation difference. Totally fine. I understand where you're coming from with it. Just straight looking, it doesn't seem right. But again, editor move versus rebuild move.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're that far off. Like, there's a reason Gabe Davis hasn't been traded for like the 3 years since Bengals has had him, because he did expect that kind of return. And so he got, he had to pay a little bit to get. Well, I kind of view those 2 seconds as like paying for a quarterback that on Tannehill's contract, assuming he still has a role next year. And so like
Willis isn't taking that job.
Willis isn't the concern with Tannehill. It's somebody else coming in from outside.
I agree. So like, I think Mark kind of set the market on what Gabe Davis was worth. It was worth Chris Olave, and I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I like Olave's like as a player better, but Mike's completely right from like a points per dollar standpoint and the future proofing of the contract. Like, you could argue Gabe Davis is the more valuable asset.
Sure.
Also, maybe just trade him to me for cheap.
Yeah, that's not going to work. But by the way, every time you send me an offer, the price goes up.
I only sent one, sir.
You know what you sent.
Anyway, okay, so we got this one. Now let's go to the real trade of the day.
Is that the trade of the day?
It was Trey Avery in a 3rd round pick for a 3rd round pick, essentially.
Well, Steelers dropped all of them.
Oh, he dropped Avery
$14
also.
million cap dump.
Yeah, to move up 5 spots.
Yeah, I feel like
That was a cheap
I
cap
just paid a domestic abuser to dump $20 million in cap, so I guess I shouldn't be talking, but I feel like we've gotten pretty cheap on cap dumps lately.
Yeah.
Well, we're all working within a very real restriction of nobody has cap room, and there's very few people that do. So they're not being smart about it. And I know that I started it out with Goose on day one of like taking a shit of players for a 5th, but I was just trying to make a first deal. I wasn't trying to set a value of anything.
If my renegotiation goes through at any point, I have cap space.
And I have 23 million in cap space right now that I can do something with. So, there are options.
If you want to move up 5 spots in the 3rd round, I guess you can fill that cap space pretty quick.
Baby, let's get talking. Now I'm getting hot and bothered. 5 spots in the 3rd round. Holy shit.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah, you do.
I got a 5th round pick. I need to move up in that. Let's get off the pod so we can talk about that.
Sexy. All right, we're done with the AFC. we're not doing this again tomorrow. We can't do 3 pods in 1 week, but we'll talk with the NFC next week. We'll talk about where this all leads us, and hell, we've got some moves to make. Hopefully, this gets some juices flowing and some activity going, but we'll see what next week is able to produce as well. So, as always, thank you all for joining. Thank you all for listening. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. And until next time, arrivederci.